In this video, we're going to be talking about APY, or what is known as the annual percentage yield. Now, APY is a really important concept in finance because it helps us to compare varying investments in similar terms. So to illustrate this, let me give you an example. Let's say we've got three different investments. We've got investments 1, 2, and of course 3. And investment 1, let's say, is for 1 year. And for investment 1, we actually are earning 10% for that year. Investment 2 is for 2 years, but earns 13%. And then lastly, investment 3 is for, let's say, 3.5 years, and over that period of time, earned 20%. Now, on the surface, we would assume that investment 3 is the better option. We earned 20% on the money that we had invested. Unfortunately, though, we're comparing the returns for different periods of time, right? It took us 3.5 years to earn 20%. For a year period, we earned 10% during that period of time. So it's hard to compare those varying investments because each of them had a different time period to which to grow. So APY, or the annual percentage yield, is what helps us take the different types of investments and then put them in a standard format for comparison purposes so that truthfully, we can evaluate our different investment options to figure out what is the best one for us. So we're going to walk through a couple of different scenarios and perform APY calculations. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to walk through a very basic equation that allows us to compute the annual percentage yield, assuming that we actually made an investment for a year period. Now, this is not necessarily entirely realistic because a lot of times we're not investing things for simply 1 year. It's for multiple years, but it's kind of forms the foundation for the next calculation I'm going to show you. So let me first start off by showing you the APY formula. It's very, very simple, and that is APY equals 100 multiplied by the amount of interest that we've earned, and that's a nominal figure, not a percentage, of course. The percentage is what we're trying to calculate, at least for a year period. And we're going to divide that by our principal. This is a pretty simple formula. So just for calculation purposes, let's go ahead and assume that our interest, which I'll abbreviate as I, that we've earned, is going to be $350. That's how much we earned over the year period. And the principal, I'm going to abbreviate as P, is $3,000. That's how much money we invested. So we're simply going to start plugging things into the formula, and then we'll solve for the unknown, which is APY. So it's going to be 100 multiplied by 350 divided by 3,000. So if you were to take 350 and divide it by 3,000, which you can go ahead and do now, you would get 11.67. Now, when you multiply that 11.67 by 100, you're going to get 0.1167, I'm sorry, you're going to get 11.67. That's the end result. So we're basically just converting this into a percentage from a decimal, which is why we multiply by 100 here. That's the only purpose it solves, it serves. Technically, we don't have to because you know that 0.1167 is in decimal form, and we can convert it. It's just part of the formula there too. So it's important just to be consistent. So this is how we calculate APY for a year period, but this isn't necessarily going to be helpful if we have multiple different returns and there are different time periods as well. So for that, we're going to introduce a different formula. And this one's going to be a little bit more lengthy, but we'll walk through it. There's a couple of extra steps, but it's really not too complicated. So we are still solving for APY, and we are still going to multiply the end result by 100, but this is where it changes. We're going to add a few extra steps to convert everything into APY and convert everything into a year term. So we're going to take 1 plus, again, our interest divided by our principal. And then we are going to add 365 divided by the days in the term. And then subtract 1. And then we'll have another bracket over here. So notice there's a couple of differences, some things that we'll want to focus on. So for starters, right, we are going to modify this by how many days as a percentage of a full 365-day term. So this is what's going to allow us to take these three different options and express them in annual terms. Now, we're not going to use these three options specifically because I provided simply just percentages, but you'll kind of see the process. So let's go ahead and perform the same calculation on the problem that we solved earlier, but let's make an important modification to it. So what we're going to do is we're still going to assume that our interest that we earn is $350 and our principal is $3,000. But what's going to vary is we're going to change the days in the term are going to be 200. So it actually only takes us 200 days to earn $350 on a $3,000 investment. So let's start by filling in some of the variables that we have. So we know that 100 is going to stay because that's the last thing we're going to do. And we're going to take 1 plus 350 divided by 3,000. And then we're going to take that to the power of 365 divided by 200 less 1. And that's it. So really, this just becomes a simple kind of order of operation sort of thing. So as long as we understand some of the basic tenets of algebra, we'll be able to solve this problem. So we're going to start with everything in parentheses. So we're going to take 350 and divide it by 3,000. So far, very similar or identical really to what we saw before. We should get 0.1167. We're going to take that and then we're going to add it to 1 here, which gives us 11.67. And so far, that's everything that's in parentheses. And now we have to figure out the power. So we're going to take 365 and we're going to divide it by 200. And that's going to be 1.825. And then we've got to subtract 1. So really, if you've got any sort of calculator that does powers, it'll make it pretty easy. We're going to take 1.1167 to the power of 1.825, and that's going to get us 1.2232. So I'm going to go ahead and shift over here. So 1.2232, and we still have to subtract 1. Which would get us 0.2232, and then multiplied by 100, and that's going to give us 22.3%. So now looking and comparing the two options here, you can see how expressing this in an annual percentage yield actually gives us more valuable information because we can compare this investment to other investments because they're now expressed in the same duration of time. They've had the same amount of time to earn, and that's really how you should evaluate investments, right? Not on the total return, because then it becomes, you can construe that a little bit and it will be very difficult to compare various investment options. But that same $350 invested this time for 200 days, not 365 days, is in annual terms 22.3%. Now notice that the amount of money we've earned does not change. That stays the exact same. The difference here is we're taking into consideration time, which is a very important element to investing because our time is very valuable and we're trying to measure our ability to be compensated for that time. If we are giving our money into some sort of investment vehicle, it's only right that we want to be compensated for that. That's called the time value of money. So by expressing all of our investments in annual terms, it gives us the ability to make comparisons with other investments so we're measuring them in the same values.